Hi, we are here to talk to you today about thyroid testing, blood thyroid testing. Thyroid symptoms are so ubiquitous, so many people experience them. Things like weight gain or inability to lose weight, cold hands and feet, thinning hair, dry skin, constipation, depression, anxiety even, insomnia, right? Go on and on. These are very common. However, when most people go in to talk to their doctor about these complaints and they test their thyroid, typically it's one, maybe three markers that are tested. We're looking at TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. That's the default marker to test, and I'll elaborate on what that is in a few minutes. Maybe free T3 and maybe free T4 if you're lucky.
Yeah,
exactly.
if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea, this would be the equivalent of taking your car into the mechanic because it's making a weird sound, it's not performing the same way. They check your oil and say that your car is fine.
That's it.
So that's it. So what we're going to do today is dive into the 11 different markers that you can run, that are imperative to run in order to get a full thyroid assessment. It's the patterns that can be found within these markers that can tell us really important information, such as, is there primary hypothyroidism? So is there true hypothyroidism reflected in a problem with the thyroid itself? I'm pointing because that's where your thyroid is. Could it be that your thyroid is fine, but it's actually cellular hypothyroidism? So you have all the symptoms of hypothyroidism, but it's not stemming from the thyroid itself. It's stemming from how your body is using thyroid hormone. Or could it be something completely separate, like stress, for example, that's affecting the utilization of thyroid hormone? So there's many different patterns that we'll see, and that's the beauty and really the importance of having a full assessment of the thyroid. And that's what we're going to dive into today.
And I think what we see a lot of times is that we have clients come in and they just had the TSH done. And they're told, you're within range, everything looks fine, but you don't feel fine.
Exactly.
Right? Like you're seeking another answer because you know intuitively that you don't feel fine. And we see this with women. It's becoming more and more common with women in general, where we see a hypothyroid or a thyroid problem. So we're going to share the screen with you and walk you through one of the labs that we could run and give you the data of why we need to look deeper at the thyroid, and we need to look at a much more narrow range profile, right? When we're talking about thyroid.
Exactly.
All right. Here we go. All right. Let's start right here, because this is where we typically see labs come in, is TSH. So let's talk about TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So thyroid stimulating hormone is the hormone that is sent from the pituitary in the brain down to the thyroid, and as the name implies, it's to get the thyroid to do its job, which is to produce its two hormones, T4 and T3. Now, one thing I want to mention with TSH is, as I mentioned, thyroid stimulating hormone. The brain is always sensing how much available thyroid hormone is in the body. So if there's sufficient amount of thyroid hormone, there will be a normal amount of TSH. If there's too little, the brain will increase the amount of TSH sent to the thyroid, basically saying, hey, we're falling short, make more thyroid hormone. If there's too much, the brain will decrease the amount of TSH that's sent to the thyroid, saying, hey, cut it back, we've got too much, okay? So TSH is an important marker to look at, but it's not the only marker.
No. And look at this range here, right? So this is what we want to point out is this is a clinical range, 0.45 to all the way to 4.5.
It's a pretty significant range when we're talking about a hormone like this.
And what we know is that most individuals play well in a very narrow range where you have the energy, you have the mental capacity, you have the memory, you sleep well, right? Where you're functioning.
You have the metabolism.
You have the metabolism. So that's something to point out there, because if you fall within that range, you are clinically within range and you may not be supported.
That range, any lab reference range, is screening for disease. It's very broad in nature. We, on the other hand, use what we refer to as functional ranges. And functional ranges are determined by medical researchers studying healthy populations to determine what optimal is. We're screening for prevention. So those ranges are a lot tighter in nature.
This is looking for the sick range. We are going to point out what the healthy range is.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then for all intents and purposes, this 2.34
looks
right
great.
Here, looks great.
Looks great.
Right. Nothing would ever be flagged right here. You're fine. Go home.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this person came in started off with some gut issues, like really bad gastrointestinal pain, stomach pain, bloating, random sporadic diarrhea, sometimes constipation, insomnia, really bad hot flashes during the day, hot flashes at night. So this thyroid profile is part of, as you can tell, a comprehensive blood panel. But we really want to zero in on the thyroid because the patterns are really interesting and glean so much information as to what's going on with this particular person.
Yeah, I think this client would have been completely missed had we not dug deeper. Okay, so let's talk about the hormones behind the hormone, right? The hormones behind the scene. The hormones, the T3 and the T4.
Exactly. So T3 and T4, the thyroid produces 93% T4 and only 7% T3. T3 is the active hormone. T3 is what actually gets in and does work. It influences everything from your metabolic rate, your body temperature, your ability to build muscle, your mood. Every cell in the body has a receptor for thyroid hormone. T3 does the work. T4, on the other hand, is essentially an inactive hormone. It needs to be converted to T3. Here's the reason why the body is organized in this way. Every different type of organ, every different type of tissue is going to need different levels of thyroid hormone. So rather than leave that responsibility up to the thyroid, the tissue does the work. So it converts T4 into T3 at whatever rate it needs to sustain its processes.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's very intelligent.
Our bodies are so cool.
Really cool. Yeah. So, but nonetheless, both of them are important. So when we're looking here at T4, the range I prefer to use is 6 to 12. So at 7.9, not too bad. Again, she's within range. Her thyroid is producing T4, so that looks great. I'm going to, for now, skip T3 uptake, skip free thyroxine index. In short, both of those reflect how the thyroid hormone is being used. Is it able to bind and actually convey the message that it's supposed to convey? Are there other hormone balances? Are there proteins? So there's a lot of other things that we can look at from that perspective, but I don't want to get too confusing. And so right now we're going to skip to T3, the active form of thyroid hormone. So here we're looking at total T3, just like we looked at total T4. We're going to talk about total T3 now. Just like we talked about total T4, we'll talk about total T3. So total T3, as I mentioned, it's the amount of thyroid hormone, the active thyroid hormone. 100 to 150 is the range I like to use for total T3. And so at 106, not too bad. Could that be a little bit higher? Sure, but again, it's not too bad. It's still within that optimal range. And one quick distinction, because I am saying total T4 and total T3, and we'll talk about free T4 and free T3, is that the totals just represent what's coming out of the thyroid. You can kind of conceptualize it in that sense. From there, we need the free levels of the hormones that actually get in and do the work at the cellular level. And at the cellular level means how we feel, how it makes us feel.
Mm-hmm.
So totals are important, but then we also need to look at the frees. What is bioavailable to do work in our body? So now we'll scroll down, see the free level of T4, free T4 direct, 1.31. Range I like to use is 1 to 1.5. Again, total T4 looks fine. Point that we're really making here is that we've seen a few different markers that would suggest this person's thyroid initially looks okay. In other words, if they go in for their routine physical, doctor ran TSH, free T3, free T4 even, these would look okay. There's a kicker though, so stay tuned till the end.
Because this is what we see
all the time.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This person's flying under the radar.
Totally.
So free T4 looks fine, right? So far, we're checking off the boxes. This person's thyroid seems to look okay. Next, we see reverse T3. And reverse T3, that one's worth discussing too. Her levels are fine. I like to use 15 to 24 is the optimal range. 19.2 is fine. Let's talk about reverse T3. T3 is the active form of the hormone, right? Reverse T3 is a competitive binder. So what does that mean? Reverse T3 is during times of stress. It's produced during times of stress. Stress is largely mediated by cortisol. Cortisol and thyroid hormone are both very energizing hormones. If both of them are high at the same time, you're going to metabolically burn out. So as a protective mechanism, if you're undergoing chronic stress, the body's like, no problem. Let's just shunt T3 production towards reverse T3 to protect your body. So in other words, if we see that reverse T3 is high, you will have hypothyroid symptoms that are secondary to some form of stressor, okay? Thyroid is fine. A second form of stressor is creating that cellular hypothyroidism, which relates into, I feel hypothyroid.
Right. And I think it's important because we live in a stressful world. Yeah. Like we are as a society, we are stressed out.
Absolutely.
And so we're seeing this present more and more and more because of our lifestyle. Maybe, like you said, not necessarily that your thyroid has an issue, but your lifestyle and how you're showing up and just how we have to operate in this world is causing the stress.
Exactly. Yep. Your thyroid is fine. It's the lifestyle that's the problem. We can't utilize thyroid hormone.
Important distinction because it's very common just to be placed on thyroid hormones without really spending time with you as the client to figure out, well, what does your life actually look like, right? Is this a symptom of lifestyle?
Exactly. And in this case in particular, taking more thyroid hormone could make it a lot worse. We're going to build up and perpetuate that resistance.
Okay. So we've got our T3s and our T4s. I just want to say something about the T4 as well as when you're getting your thyroid run, right? You're having a thyroid lab run and you just get the TSH and maybe you do get put on a prescription pharmaceutical, right? Levothyroxine, Synthroid.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's really important that you do know your T3, T4 levels because some pharmaceuticals don't contain T4 and you might need it. So that's why it's really important when you do ask for your labs or you come to us and you have them run, we're going to look at that to make sure if you do need a T4 supplementation that it's in the prescription or it's in the supplement or we're addressing how the body can make more of it.
Exactly. And on that same note, some medications only contain T4.
Right, Cytomel.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right?
They
Cytomel.
only contain T4. So it's worth noting, let's take this situation again. If you've got hypothyroidism occurring at the cellular level, you're not converting T4 into T3 appropriately, medication's not going to help.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's go here. So we've gone through, right?
Yep.
All intensive purposes, this client looks great.
So far looks fine.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what the problem is.
Yep.
Until we go right down here.
Boom.
There it is.
Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is the elevated thyroid peroxidase antibody, TPO.
Right down here.
Mm-hmm. This is a game changer. Now, this becomes an autoimmune condition. This is a condition known as Hashimotos Thyroiditis. In this case, this person's immune system is attacking her thyroid. In other words, the immune system is mistaking her thyroid for an invader, right? A harmful invader, and is destroying the thyroid. Presumably, even though her levels are pretty high, these TPO levels are pretty high, given how the rest of the thyroid looks, given the fact that her symptoms only came on within a year or so ago, presumably we're catching this pretty early, which is why the rest of her thyroid levels look okay. Allowing this to progress, we're going to see this tank really fast because the thyroid is essentially being killed.
Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
You think about that? Like
Mm-hmm.
your own tissue is eating itself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Very common. I mean, what is
so common though?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 1 in 8 women has an autoimmune condition now. 1 in 12 men. It's very common.
Yeah, and that's rapidly growing.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing that. So,
yeah.
And I wonder too. I gotta wonder if it's because we're missing these pieces and we're missing the lifestyle piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
huge. The gut health, the lifestyle.
It is.
Okay,
Yes.
so we have a client now. We've seen it. We've figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
Hashimoto's.
Yep.
Let's point out too, we got a little bit of a low D3.
Yep.
We like to look at that.
Yep. Low vitamin D.
Low vitamin D. But Hashimoto's, now what?
Okay.
Right?
So now this person's presenting with hypothyroid symptoms. Here's the thing. Still not a problem with the thyroid. It's a problem with the immune system. Again, giving this person thyroid medication can help take the edge off. More than likely, there's going to be this dance because of trying to regulate the amount of thyroid hormone as the levels fluctuate pretty significantly. And that's because as the thyroid continues to be destroyed, it releases varying levels of thyroid hormone into the blood on top of whatever's happening with the medication. So, big question, what do we do about it? Right? Big approach. The main approach is to figure out what's causing the dysfunctional immune system. We have to look for the source of injury. And I use the term injury because the definition of inflammation is the immune system's response to injury. That's it. It's the immune response to injury. Inflammation's not a bad thing. We just have to figure out what the immune system is responding to. So some of the main things that we would look at in this case, what's happening with this person's gut? How does their gut microbiome look? How are they digesting and absorbing nutrients? Do they have sensitivities to food? Did you know that the clinical research is pretty cut and dry, that gluten is just as much of a problem for Hashimoto's as it is for those with celiac? So could their diet be perpetuating this problem? Not could, how much?
Right.
How much is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Stress levels, what does their emotional stress look like? Do they feel like they have purpose in life? Do they feel like they have a connection to others? What does their nutrient status look like? What does their toxic load status look like? All of this will that's what our job is.
Right.
All of this we prioritize
We've got you.
for you.
That's what we want to say. We've got you because, right, when you hear that, it is overwhelming.
It is.
Right? And then we want to shut down.
Yeah.
But that's where, when you really lean on a team of specialists or a specialist, they're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper with you. They're going to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however many hours it takes to figure out what is this root cause. Otherwise, this client would go and they would get their pharmaceutical, they get their levothyroxine, and they would walk out and they would continue to have an autoimmune disease, and the thyroid would continue to be eaten, and the symptoms would never really,
they'll get worse.
They'll just get worse.
They'll get worse.
Right? And then you're constantly searching and spending more money and searching. Then you find a different doctor until you find the answers. So this is what we do to support you in this well-being. And it gets tricky when you present a certain way, but you've got one little right? Like one little flag.
Right.
Bing,
One little thing.
that's it.
This would have been skipped even by the best of efforts. It would have been missed without running these antibodies.
So there's lots of solutions with the thyroid. There's lots of support. Like we said, there's dietary support, there's lifestyle support, there's supplement support, right? We have to look at the other immune function support, like what's the injury, what's the offender. We see it all across the board of different things, even just like a trauma in somebody's life, right?
Absolutely.
So people will just kind of brush past that, but it's like that can be a huge trigger as well. A divorce, a death, a loss of a job. So we are going to help look deeper at the thyroid because it is so common
and so important
and so important and so overlooked.